Welcome, everyone, to the last session of Gaza Summer School. Today's subject is Palestine, Repression, and Looking Ahead. My name's Danica. I'm Code Pink's National Co-Director, and I'll be hosting today's session alone because Noor lost her voice during the DNC last week. Literally still a whisper, even with a weekend of rest. So that just means I didn't yell loud enough, I guess. Regardless, I'm so glad you're all here tonight because we have a great program and a great speaker for you all tonight. Just to go over the norms for the Gaza Summer School, please introduce yourself in the chat, your name and location, so we can see where everyone's coming from. Please remember to be respectful. This isn't a debate, but a discussion. We're not here to mediate arguments. We're here to learn from each other and take action for Palestine. Please be kind. Please be curious, and please be ready to take action. And please, I beg you all to stay muted, unless we're sharing, because we record and live stream this. So if you don't want your sounds, your chewing, whatever it is you unmute for to be on the live stream, please don't unmute. You can change your name if you don't want it on the live stream, or turn your camera off, whatever feels comfortable for you all. Today's session is going to be a little different since from the last one. After our first speaker, you'll get an opportunity to ask questions, and then the floor will be open for folks to share reflections on the Gaza Summer School and any actions you took over the summer and the DNC if you joined us in Chicago. So please leave your questions for our speaker in the chat while she presents, so then we can move efficiently into our second half. And yeah, with that, let's get started. I'll introduce our speaker. I'm so excited to have Chicago's own Rania Salem. Born and raised in Chicago, Rania is a Palestinian woman from Dheisheh refugee camp in Palestine. Her family's originally from a village called Jrash that was ethnically cleansed in 1948, and her family was internally displaced to the refugee camp in Bethlehem. Rania is an active poet, a program coordinator with the Illinois Coalition for Immigrant and Refugee Rights, and a community organizer with the U.S. Palestinian Community Network. Rania has played a huge role in the DNC marches, so she's a great person to hear from. Welcome, Rania. I'll pass it over to you.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Danica, for that warm welcome. And I would like to say thank you to the Code Pink team for having me here today. It's an honor to be here and to speak to everyone here. So first things first, I know we have a couple of topics we'd like to touch on today, right? So essentially what I have within my outline, of course, I'm going to be speaking firstly on repression throughout here, mainly within the community here in Chicago, right, throughout time. Hopefully it won't be too long-winded, but just kind of going through the main points throughout history that our community has faced a lot of repression, right? I'm going to speak on just kind of a bit on the DNC, mainly about the permit fight, right? And then the DNC itself, and then my own reflections on everything post DNC week, right? And then, yeah, we're just gonna kind of just go through a couple of things here today. So, all right, so the first thing I would actually like to mention, our communities, and when I say our communities, I'm mainly talking about the Arab, Muslim, and Palestinian community, but a lot of communities across a lot of different backgrounds face repression, just like the one that I'm going to talk to you all about today. I'm just going to be focusing more so on the Arab and Palestinian community here in Chicago. So our communities have been facing repression, racial profiling, and high surveillance for decades, right? So going as early as the 1800s, with even more crackdowns on our community since the 1970s, especially since the United States government confirmed its unconditional alliance with the Israeli colonization of Palestinian land and essentially relied on creating this anti-Arab environment here in the United States through corporate media, right? Through different representations, through different institutions, through different state policies, and relied on racist discrimination and harassment to essentially mark Arabs, especially Palestinians, as potentially violent enemies in order to justify its relationship to Israel, which is a Zionist and apartheid state, right? So we see the dehumanization of our people and across all communities, right, play out constantly in order to essentially garner or foster a general acceptance amongst the American people for increased state violence on our people here within the United States, and then also military violence on our people abroad, right? So we've seen this dehumanization play out against our people, right, before the Iraq war to kind of justify why we're going to war, why we're murdering, Iraqis, why we're bombing civilians, children, mothers, fathers, etc. And just to kind of get the general American acceptance of it, right? So we're seeing that kind of play out. Also, we see it play out with the Palestinian community as well. So the result of racial profiling and surveillance in the short and then in the long-term explanation of that is that it is used to suppress dissent, right? It's used to surveil and criminalize the everyday lives of people of color, especially Arab Muslims and people perceived to be Arab or perceived to be Muslim, right? And to uphold white supremacy. So racial profiling and surveillance within our communities is essentially used to reinforce racial stereotypes that treat Arabs as quote unquote terrorists. It essentially scares our communities and pushes us back, and it scares us away from protesting, from organizing, and keeps us even away from each other, whether that be within a political environment or even a social environment. So, this is a common practice that we see, and within racial profiling, there has been significant examples that the government has used in order to further surveil us, whether that be the use of using SARS, which I'm not sure if anyone has ever heard of it, but I definitely recommend looking into it. So SARS are suspicious activity reports, which are the gathering and the documenting and analyzing of reports between different law enforcement agencies, this being, the FBI, this being different police departments, this being different governmental agencies, right? To essentially encourage local residents to spy and report on our community. It was also another tool in order it was a tool actually used to suppress, criminalize, and incite fear into our communities, while also reinforcing stereotypes, because SARS reports was actually encouraging other people outside of our community to kind of report on us. So an example of a SARS report would be, this is actually a legit example of a report. A Syrian girl, this was, maybe over a decade ago, was worried about her grandparents in Syria during the civil war that was going on, and she was speaking to an actual counselor at her school about it. Her counselor then reported this counseling session where the girl is talking about how she's afraid of the safety of her grandparents. And this counselor actually reported it to governmental agencies, saying that this was suspicious and something that it should be looked into. It was just a normal conversation, but then it became a SARS report, which is weird, right? So a normal person that is not within our community is essentially being encouraged to report and surveil our community, not just the FBI, not just the police, but people themselves as well. Another example of racial profiling surveillance that was created was countering violent extremism programs, which was a federal anti-terrorism program that essentially also encouraged community members and social service providers to participate within this national security apparatus. So CVEs was actually being used where they would try to encourage our own community members. So like a religious leader within our church or mosque within the community was being encouraged to also add on to this surveillance, right? And this, I just want to mention, this failed. And CVEs actually failed. It never actually took off because of organizations like the Arab American Action Network, who organized their communities, who did teach-in sessions, who educated the masses, who told the community X, Y, and Z, and they organized their community to rally against something called CVEs that in the end it did not take off, right? So due to the community's organizing, spearheaded by incredible organizations like the AAA and the Arab American Action Network, right? CVEs actually failed to even develop. And also through that organizing, SARS reports themselves have been exposed to be racist and have been exposed to be another way of racial profiling onto our communities. And so we have received access to these reports, which is why we even know what they even look like. And folks are still organizing to this day to fully get those reports deleted from any database that they might be in, right? So just just a couple of things here, right? So the Arab communities of the Chicagoland area and Arab communities nationally have been racialized. They've been criminalized and surveilled by law enforcement for decades as the domestic face of the enemy abroad, right? And we've seen this escalate, especially after 9/11, right? So after 9/11, we've seen an expansion of this surveillance. And, you know, this reality has been met with community resistance as Arabs continue to organize and mobilize for their rights to live full lives without being marked as enemies. So I think it's really, really important that I even talked about this kind of repression, because the point of surveillance is to deter any kind of dissent against the US government. It's meant to suppress any kind of political critique and also to criminalize our communities. So when you criminalize our communities, right, you generate a lot of fear around the people that you are dehumanizing, because then it makes it much easier for you to dehumanize them. So a lot of people outside of the Arab community are growing more fearful due to increased racialization, due to increased stereotypes, right, on that community. And that dehumanization in turn makes it much, much easier for the United States government to essentially ravage our lands, to murder our people back home, and to continue attacking us further in order to secure US imperial interests in our countries in the name of protecting American people and countering terrorism, which we all know at this point is complete bullshit, right? We, as the general American population, have gotten quite a bit better at recognizing propaganda, especially within the last few months. And with these skills that we've developed, you know, we need to be using them much more often. But I will say that, you know, just like post 9/11, the violence that has ensued to Arab communities, Muslim communities, even Muslim adjacent communities, or anyone who looks Arab or looks Muslim, right? The violence that has ensued was insane. And so I bring this up because maybe, or not maybe, I'm sure we all have seen this happen again post-October, right? So post-October 7th, right? We have seen an incredible amount of inciting violence into our communities here. So, and this is intentional, right? They're intentionally inciting violence onto the Palestinian community specifically, and Arab and Muslim communities, because in the general American eyes, they're all connected, right? And the reason for this is because the United States wants that acceptance from the general American population for it to continue supporting the Zionist and genocidal state known as Israel, right? So a couple of things here that I do want to mention is that not only is repression seen by the FBI, not only is it seen by governmental agencies, but repression is also seen by politicians, right? Every politician, regardless of party, that has spoken up in vicious condemnation of the Palestinian people and their right to self-defense against Israeli war crimes also has blood on their hands. What I want to mention is that since October 7th, Palestinians have been called uncivilized animals, terrorists on public outlets, right? Whether that along with the mass dehumanizations that politicians have been creating in order to create this hostile racist atmosphere of intentionally harming our communities and to intentionally dehumanize, has also ensued an insane amount of hate onto our communities. And we have seen this. We've seen this when we've seen, the murder of a 6-year-old boy here in Illinois, right? The 6-year-old boy named Wadia. He was stabbed to death by his landlord, right? And then the attempted murder of his mother. We've seen these hate crimes ensue when, if you remember, 3 Palestinian men in Vermont were shot, right? We've seen this violence manifest when we've seen a woman attempt to drown a 3-year-old child in Texas. So this is all a direct result of the anti-Palestinian, anti-Arab, and anti-Muslim rhetoric utilized by politicians, by the media, by governmental agencies, by police, right? And politicians like Genocide Joe, Killer Kamala, Terrible Trump, right? They have blood on their hands because they systemically dehumanize and target our communities as they attempt to justify this genocide that they fully and unconditionally support in order to further their white supremacist, colonial, and neo-colonialist agendas across the entire globe, right? Just a couple of things as well. You know, we've seen a lot of repression within the last 10 months as well. We've seen the crackdown on students, right? We've seen the crackdown on students, right? We've seen the way students have been treated, especially students who have created encampments on their campuses, right? We've seen students get suspended. We've seen students actually get, what's the word when they get thrown out of their school? Expelled, sorry, oh my God, suspended, they get expelled. We've seen students not receive their diplomas after graduating, and students who, you know, might have not been one of the leaders of the encampment, but are just affiliated because they're Palestinian, right? We've seen this. We've seen just a crackdown also on all immigrants, on refugees, on anyone that is pro-Palestinian, any and all activists that are pro-Palestinian, right? And this is intentional. It's intentional because they want to silence any and all criticism of the United States and of Israel. You know, right now, the moment is just not comprehensible, right? You have over 40,000 Palestinians that have been murdered in Gaza by Israel, with 10 to 20,000 unaccounted for that are under the rubble. You have more than 90,000 injured and 2 million people displaced. And when I say 40,000 people have been killed, we know those numbers are severely undercounted. We don't actually know the real number. It can be 3 times that amount. The only reason we say 40,000 is because that's the only real number that's being counted for in all news outlets or any kind of outlet that is, I guess, quote unquote, valid, right? But we know those numbers are severely undercounted. So, yeah, repression against our communities is not new. It's been happening for decades. It is meant to it's just fear-mongering at the end of the day. It's meant to silence us. And sometimes, honestly, sometimes the consequences that a lot of people face is significant. It's significant enough to push other people away from the movement. A couple of things that I do want to mention before I move on, because I think I forgot to mention them a little bit, but I think that specifically with organizing, what I truly want to mention here and bring attention to, which I think maybe some folks here might actually know of, but 2 campaigns. So one was the Midwest 23, and I want to mention the Rasmiya Audit campaign. So the Midwest 23, I'm not sure of how many people are familiar, but essentially it was 23 activists and organizers, mainly from the anti-war movement throughout the Midwest, and a few USPCN organizers were under attack. Essentially, they were all raided by the FBI. This was in the year of 2010. And the Midwest 23, they were all subpoenaed to a federal grand jury, and it was essentially a witch hunt, right? It was just a really intense time. And it was a witch hunt, right? It was an attempt by federal law enforcement to harass, intimidate, and pressure anti-war and international solidarity activists into informing on friends and on colleagues in social justice movements. So no arrests or indictments were made, just as an FYI. And the reason why no arrests or indictments were made was because the 23 activists that were under attack, they all stood together and they refused to testify. And that ended up being their light. That ended up being their saving grace. This was an attempt by law enforcement to not only create fear and hysteria within the communities around the Midwest 23, but it also was trying to get people to turn on each other out of fear. And the people said, no, we refuse to. And by them standing strong together, they ended up being able to put this chapter of their lives behind them and keep moving forward. But we know that the FBI still sniffs around our communities. We know that people are still getting visited by the FBI. We know that the FBI is still surveilling and is constantly in their little cars in our communities just watching us, right? We know this. And the Rasmiya Aude campaign, I'm not entirely sure if everyone knows who Rasmiya Aude is, but just an FYI, she is a Palestinian, a true Palestinian icon. She was a leader within the movement here, especially in Chicago. And she was incredible. She was a mentor of mine. I loved her. 11 years ago, in 2013, Rasmiya Aude was arrested. And what led to her arrest, what actually put her on the map, was actually the Midwest 23. The Midwest 23 actually had law enforcement looking into a lot of people around the 23 activists that were under attack. And Rasmiya Aude was an easy one. She was not an easy target, but she was a prominent person in the community, and they knew that they can probably get something against her. But essentially, Rasmiya, she worked to empower her community, and she was fiercely loved by everyone around her. People all across the country actually rallied behind her as she fought against the injustice that, served against her for 4 long and hard years. Rasmiya Aude, she was targeted intentionally because she was a powerful Palestinian organizer for the community at home and was also a powerful Palestinian community organizer for Palestinians abroad, especially in the diaspora and in Palestine as well. And that led her to be a target of the FBI, of racial profiling, and of ICE. So she was Rasmiya, before she came to the United States, she had immigrated here. She was arrested and tortured in Israeli imprisonments. And when she came here to the United States, she was filling out her naturalization forms, etc., 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 X, Y, and Z. She said that, she had never been, sorry, I'm just now seeing the chat. I'm sorry, once again. Oh, that's me on my day. Let me write it in for you. Thank you. Okay.
And I'll help direct questions from the chat to you after you're done presenting, Rania.
Cool. Also, I'm sorry if I'm just talking at you all, but this is kind of just how I decided to do it. Okay, so I don't want to spend too long on Rasmiya herself, but the thing is what was really, really important about Rasmiya Aude is that despite that she did get deported, her case was a win for the community because Rasmiya Aude did not face any prison time. She did not serve any time in prison or in ICE detention, which was a victory for us, right? It was sad that she was deported. It was sad that she had to leave us, but this ultimately was the best decision for her because being imprisoned again would have been extremely traumatizing for her as she was imprisoned in Israeli imprisonment back in the 1960s and 70s, right? So the one thing that I want to mention about Rasmiya and about people like Rasmiya, because she's not the only one that faced a fate like this, is that the community rallied hard for her. The community never stopped fighting for her. The community never stopped advocating for her. The community was always there for her. Whether her court was in Detroit or whether it was in Chicago, people got on a bus every single time for 4 years to rally behind her. So one thing that I want to mention here, and I mentioned all of this repression, right? Which the fear that is instilled in our community is extremely valid. It's extremely real. And I will never invalidate that. But there is something that I want to bring to our attention here, is that we see this repeated effort of repressing our people, our movement, and our cause for liberation into silence and inaction, but we also see a repeated pattern of that failure. We continue to organize, we continue to persist, and we continue to rise because the movement itself is much greater than all of us, and we will not be silenced. And that is one thing that I will always continue to see amongst all organizers, amongst people in our community, is that we have this hope inside us that it's not about me or you as individuals, it's about the movement, it's about the liberation of our people as a whole. And that's what matters at the end of the day. So I do want to mention, of course, we are seeing an escalated level of repression here in all sectors of society, whether it's smear campaigns against people, whether it's smear campaigns against people's work, people's organizing. We've seen people getting fired from their jobs, right? I already spoke on the crackdown of students. And we see censorship on media, right? On social media, especially on Instagram. But I think that the point of this targeted repression is just to get us to stop talking about Palestine. They don't want us to be talking about Palestine. They don't want us educating or mobilizing the masses, and they don't want us unifying together under one powerful movement that essentially works and fights together, which is going to bring me into our moment right now and will also bring me into the DNC, because this targeted repression fails every single time. So of course, I do want to mention that, just a little bit of backtracking, when Palestinians first arrived here, of course, they opened the 63rd Merkaz. Merkaz is just like the 63rd office, where we were advocating for Palestinians here, while we also connected our communities here within Chicago, and we also formed deep relationships with the Black, Latinx, immigrant communities, especially the working class communities here in Chicago. What I want to mention is that Palestine has been an iconic signifier of solidarity and support for the left, which has always been led by it has always been led by Arab progressives. And the Palestinian cause is not only a colonial struggle, right? It is also a national and global liberation cause. And Palestine is an intersectional issue. And of course, we saw the manifestations of that solidarity across all communities when 40 years later, right, Palestinian icon and leader Rasmia Odeh, just to bring her up again, when Rasmia Odeh was under attack, not only did our community rally for her, but also we saw Black, brown, and marginalized groups of all communities across the nation stand with her as well. So I do want to mention that despite this repression that we see against our communities, we continue to stand strong, and we don't stand alone. We are always surrounded by our allies who fight with us and support us unconditionally, right? And what I want to mention and what I want to bring attention to is that Chicago is a city that has been doing mass mobilizations. And when I say mass mobilizations, I mean still, after over 50 mass mobilizations, we still have a couple of thousand people out there on the streets on a Saturday, rallying with the Chicago Coalition for Justice in Palestine, right? That is tremendous. It's tremendous to still bring out a couple thousand people, right? Maybe in the beginning we had 25,000 at our height, but it's still amazing that after 50, maybe even 60 mass mobilizations, we're still bringing out over 1,000, over a couple thousand, right? Which is significant. And this is not even including all of the other actions that are happening alongside this one. A lot of different groups are doing demonstrative actions. Students are really kicking it on their campuses, right? We're doing a lot of targeted campaigns, right, against politicians. We're visiting politicians at their homes. We won't let them sleep, right? Just kind of, it's an array of tactics as is happening all at the same time. And it's all important, right? So what I want to mention is that also to add on to the unification across all different communities, I'm sure folks know that in Chicago, we actually passed a ceasefire resolution as well back in, I think it was January, I think it was January. And the reason why I even mention a ceasefire resolution is because, you know, the Black movement, especially here in Chicago, who have been at the forefront in terms of true solidarity and presence for the Palestinian movement here, was actually they created a Black and Brown Coalition for Palestine that led a lot of the solidarity work and actually helped us pass a ceasefire resolution. And this is historic because it actually put all progressive people in the city working together towards a common goal, right? And the ceasefire resolution was, I think, maybe the first example that we could probably see within the last year of a true united front of all oppressed people coming together to push for this resolution to be passed, which showed us where Palestine was in Chicago. And it also showed us that the Palestinian liberation movement in Chicago was important, it's valuable, and it's at the forefront of every single movement, right? And we see this happen again at the DNC, the Coalition to March on the DNC. We again see a unified front of all communities across the United States with Palestine at the forefront. And this is remarkable. It's amazing. You guys, you see a coalition of over 270 organizations coming together, united, with making Palestine as the #1 demand. We have never seen Palestine so important as it was right now, in the way that all communities are making those parallels, why Palestine is an intersectional issue. Why, for example, if I care about immigrant rights, why I have to care about Palestine. If I care about reproductive justice, why do I have to care about Palestine? People are making those connections that, you know, Palestine matters, right? And with the DNC, essentially, what the coalition was saying is that the whole world is watching. The whole entire world is watching. You know, you have masses from the Black, immigrant, Latino, Asian, LGBTQ, trans communities. You have people from the women's, reproductive, and workers' rights movements all come together and tell the Democrats and also all politicians, right, that are complicit, that the whole world is watching, that we will come together. We stand with Palestine unconditionally. And we all had a list of demands, and we reflected those demands on the stage. We reflected those demands on banners, on posters, in the crowds, in chants, in puppets. And the central issue, the central demand was stop U.S. aid to Israel, stop the genocide, stand with Palestine, and free Palestine. And that is a truly beautiful thing. A truly, truly beautiful thing. And, you know, a lot of those Midwest 23 activists that were under attack, oh my God, why did I even say it like that? I'm so sorry. Most of the 23 activists that were under attack within the Midwest 23 were there that day too. And they weren't scared. They weren't afraid of anything. That didn't stop them from organizing. I do want to mention a couple of things. How am I doing on time? Okay. I should have.
Maybe like 2 more minutes and we could take a couple questions.
Okay, cool. So what I really want to mention, real quick, the permit fight. So the permit fight within the DNC, you know, what I want to mention is that the coalition spent a year organizing, and actually turned in their applications for a permit for Union Park and for Park 578 in November, right? So in November, we applied for permits, right? And we received 0 response for months from the city until we reached out to them. So the city initially said that we were going to be able to give you guys stage, sound, porta potties, and then they backtracked and they lied, stating that they never said that, which is a violation of our rights, and it's dirty politics. And the coalition was then forced to fill out new permit applications, and we received a response only a few days before the 19th, stating that they're granting the permit, but with conditions, meaning no stage, no platform, no sound equipment, no portable porta potties, no tents, no canopies. And the city's rejection of our ability to have sound, stage, porta potties, and tents at the march was an active violation of our First Amendment rights because, of course, like I said before, they don't want us speaking on Palestine. They want us to remain silent. They want us to remain complicit in this system that continues to send billions of dollars to an apartheid state, right? And they want us to remain complicit and silent while they continue backing Israel that's committing a genocide on the Palestinian people in Gaza, right? So we organized. The city negotiated with us in bad faith, but we as the coalition, we organized, right? We fought like hell to make sure that the city accepts our permit without conditions and that we are able to march within sight and sound of the DNC and with actual sound so that the DNC can hear our demands being heard, right? So we will continue to reiterate our message that we stand loud and clear, that we unconditionally stand with Palestine, and the Democrats and also the Republicans are actively choosing to participate and fund a genocide of over 40,000 Palestinians that were killed by Israel. And we refuse to remain silent. We refuse to allow them to do what they're doing with our tax dollars. I think I'm probably 8 on time.
Thank you, Rania. That was super helpful. And thank you for all the context to Chicago specifically. It's interesting how so much of it is centered here. So we don't have a ton of time for questions, so I'll do two. I'll do a serious one and then I think a fun one. So the first question is from Quinn. How do you, or did you, or do you work to cultivate community within a culture of fear and surveillance?
I think what is really, really important is to build trust in your community. Your community has to know you. And so by building that trust, by constantly being out there in the community, by showing them who you are, and then it also helps if you're friends with a lot of those community members that know a lot of people to also give you that in. So sometimes, when I'm organizing and I want to tell people about stuff that we're doing, right? I'm flying around the mosque. I have the Arab Women's Committee as a part of the Arab American Action Network helping me. And those are women that are also immigrants who are constantly in the community as well, help give me legitimacy as well. So you have to build trust. That's the number one thing. People have to know you.
Thank you. That's super helpful. And then the fun question is, and I do want to make sure people have time for reflection. So if you keep putting your questions in the chat, just reach out to Code Pink and we can hopefully answer some of your other questions more in depth. But can you tell I think this is from John, can you tell us about Little Palestine in Chicago?
Beautiful community, a lot of food, a lot of nice people. I definitely think you should come see it for yourself and just go anywhere you want, really. Just talk to anyone. People love to talk.
Do you have top food or dessert recs?
Oh my God. Oh God. Okay, so go to the Nile, for breakfast. That's a good one. Dessert, oh my God, I feel like you go down Harlem these days and like everything is a dessert place now. I'm trying to think. Honestly, you can't really go wrong with Jerusalem sweets for knafa. But I love knafa. But you can honestly just go anywhere. Oh, I also heard there's this little like I haven't tried it yet. It's a little not like a shack, like what's it called? Food truck outside of Zamzam Sweets. And I heard they have very, very good falafel. So
Sweet. Thank you, Rania. Well, I know we promised we would talk through our reflections of the summer school, and our reflections of the summer being in action. a lot of us were at the DNC last week. Like Rania was talking, we saw sort of what the repression looked like up front. So it'd be interesting to talk through that as well. But please keep putting your questions in the chat. Hopefully we can answer them offline. And with that, I want to open it up to people. You could use the raise your hand function on Zoom and I can call on you. But the prompt is just if you've learned anything from the Gaza Summer School, what has it been? What are you taking with you into all of your actions coming up? And also any actions that you want to share with everyone that you've been a part of over the summer. I know we're urging a lot of folks to confront their member of Congress as they were in district for the last month while Congress was in recess. So if anyone has any stories like that, please raise your hand and feel free to share. Or if you've had any things that stuck out to you from the summer school sessions as well. I'll give people a second. I was gonna ask Noor to share, but she can't. She can't talk. Well, people are thinking, one thing that was really special to me during the week at the DNC was my congressman, Mike Quigley, hates me. Oh, he knows of my work and we've confronted him many a times, but Code Pink did, it wasn't me personally, but Grace from Code Pink did get into an event he was at while at the DNC at Wrigley Field and disrupt him and confront him directly on his stance on continuing to arm Israel. So that was my sort of highlight of the DNC was Grace confronting my Congress member, and she had all the talking points she needed. Rania, do you want to say more on that since people haven't raised their hands yet? The thing you just put in the chat?
Yeah, sorry. I think that what I really, really wanted to mention is that I think the DNC was a success, not only because of the numbers, right? But also because we had all of the media outlets talking about Palestine, which is huge. It's extremely huge that, I'm going to be honest, like, we know about Palestine and we fight for Palestine and we
He
advocate.
was really jealous.
But a lot of people watch the news and they believe the news and they see what's on the news. So for them to see Palestine, a lot of people are going to look at that and be like, oh, what the heck? What is this actually about? Which I think is good. We should always be wary of the media, but we had them talking about Palestine. We forced everyone's hand, and that's good.
Yeah, if anyone has any reflections on the DNC, even if you weren't there in Chicago, what you saw the coverage being, I think I was in the thick of it all week, so I didn't really see what people were saying about the DNC while it was happening. If anyone wants to share. Yeah, Julianne?
Hi. I was kind of going to just reflect on something you said, a question you asked earlier, just like from this series, the Gaza Summer School. And for me, I think, especially the piece that you were saying about congressperson, I'm still trying to kind of work together with some folks in my district. I live in the 7th district in New Jersey, and that's like a really big, like the Democrats really want to turn it blue. So thinking through how, to leverage that with people that I know are also dedicated to this. And I think that I'm going to really like use the resources that you all provided for us in order to, like take that action and be bold about it, because definitely not easy to take that action.
That's great to hear. On our Bought by Zionism website, our staff member Alexis just put up a toolkit for how to start a campaign in your district. And she'll be going over that in the upcoming weeks, but it is there and for anyone to use. It's super, super useful. And people can always email Alexis with any questions you have about starting a local campaign around this issue, around challenging a member of Congress on their AIPAC contributions or stance on arming Israel as a whole. Grace just put the link in the chat, so that's super helpful. And Alexis's email. So thank you so much for sharing. That's super great to hear. And the Code Pink team is here to support you in that work as well. Oh, Alexis is here. Hi, Alexis. Monique.
Hi, yes. First of all, I want to thank everybody that has done the summer school. It's been absolutely amazing, informative, and heartwarming to see so many people participate too. So I just wanted to say that up front. One of the sessions that we had was, and I can't remember the organization's name, but it was that man that started the rebuilding of plant life and the olive trees. And that really, really took me aback. I've been distraught just by obviously the entire situation, but the olive trees, it's such a tradition within Palestine, and for all that to be purposely destroyed is just heart-wrenching, right? It's culture being erased. And for that man to create an organization and rebuild some of that is just amazing and beautiful. So that really, out of all the things, has stood out to me the most. Yeah. So just wanted to share.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. That was Dr. Mazen Kumsia from Bethlehem's Museum of Natural History. We'll put his name in the chat. And that was, and just in the link Grace put as well. And yeah, that was such a huge thread of the summer, is talking about how Israel uses environmentalism and the sort of guise of it to justify the occupation of Palestine, sort of the myth of turning the desert green, or whatever they're saying is. I don't even remember it because it's so stupid. But Dr. Mazen was so insightful and in sort of breaking through those ideas. So thank you for bringing that back up. That's going to be a super part of the thread for our War Is Not Green campaign, is Israel's feigning environmentalism, such as, giving their soldiers vegan boots. What does that count if you're killing nearly 200,000 people? So I'm gonna pass Colin, do you wanna? I think you're next, sorry.
Okay. Sorry about that. All right, just took me a minute. Wow.
Oh, Colin, you remuted yourself. There you
go. Yeah, I think on the Gaza Summer School, the one that was about, I think it was like social media stuff. It might have been about art, but social media came in. I thought that was pretty handy. I would, unless I missed it, I would like to recommend, if there's one more on like for future consideration, one on like doing like deep canvassing or things like that. I find that's something that, and I put a question in there too, that's been very like hard to get going, at least in my area. And also, and the other question would be if folks know of any active like deep canvassing door-to-door activities for Palestine.
Colin, where are you located?
I'm in Albany, New York.
Okay. I'm gonna put an email in the chat for you. You should totally reach out to Chris, who's our East Coast organizer and organizes in New York. Because sort of deep canvassing and community outreach is something we've been emphasizing with our local chapters, is like a huge part of moving the needle on this issue, is just talking to people and building community. So Grace just put the link to Chris's email in the chat. I totally recommend you reaching out to them. They'll be able to sort of help you through that, because I do think we have a couple upstate chapters, if not one in Albany close by. So hopefully that'll be helpful.
All right, thanks.
Yeah. Well, I think this will be our last one, and then we'll wrap up, which I can't believe.
Yeah, hi, this is Will. And to me, the DNC wasn't really surprising, but it's just kind of amazing that after about 10 months of protesting, writing to our Congress people, writing to the White House, student encampments, they still won't budge. They still won't change their minds on supporting genocide. So to me, it just reminds me that we just have to keep persistent, that, sometimes we're busy, sometimes we're tired, work, and life gets in the way. And, I think just not stopping and just continuing. And even if we take a break for a day or two or whatever it might be, just continuing to protest, reach out to our Congress people, write into the White House, social media, And I think the only way they're going to respond is if they see that people are not dropping the matter, and that, also cost them some votes. I think if it costs them some votes, then they'll, start paying more attention. But it's just amazing how unrepresentative it is, because most of the American people support a ceasefire, but they're just not budging at this point.
Yeah, thank you for those insights. They are counting on us to get tired. And whenever I feel like during the DNC, we're pulling like 14-hour, 15-hour days. And when I had trouble getting up the next morning to go out, I just thought of the people of Gaza. And I can't be tired. And none of us can afford to be tired right now. We just have to keep going. And I think it's true that the DNC didn't allow a Palestinian speaker. It's true that Kamala hasn't shifted her stance on this issue. But I think Rania highlighted this when she was speaking. We were massively successful in making sure that Palestine was everywhere. There was no one going in or out of that convention that did not have it on their mind. It was impossible. It was all over the news, and we made our demands as clear as possible to them. And I think anyone who was there or anyone that helped should be incredibly proud of themselves for that, because it's not an easy feat. And we were talking about it before the DNC started, but the DNC was just a point of mobilization. It was a jumping off point for bringing in new people and building the movement stronger moving forward. Because there's a lot more work to do. Code Pink had a huge influx of members, and I know that our organization was not the only one. There were tons of people moved by our actions at the DNC to join the fold. So we have the people on our side. We are nothing without the people. And I am so grateful to be with you all and to be with you all this entire summer, learning and expanding our skills. We will continue to do so. We're talking about programming next. Yes, thank you for joining this summer school. I'm just reading the script and what it said me. She's usually doing this. You're officially graduated from the summer school. Congratulations. We'd love to hear your feedback on this summer program so we can decide our, Code Pink's whole thing is education. So we want to plan educational sequences for you all that work for you all better, that we can improve upon what we've done so far. So we had an exit survey. If you could please fill it out, that would be great. It'll also be sent to your emails, I imagine, but if you could fill out that survey, we'd be very grateful so we can put out better programming in the future. We'll be transitioning back into our Missing Piece Monday sequences. So if you're looking for somewhere to connect with organizers, share your actions, and discuss strategies, feel free to join that. They'll be once a month, resuming on September 9th. I think Grace is going to put the link in the chat. Yes, she did. Thank you. And then Code Pink Congress is also resuming September 3rd with Congress back in session. There's a lot going to be going on in Congress to look out for, including potentially a bill to block the newest sale of arms to Israel that Bernie Sanders might introduce in the coming weeks. So and then also Congress is going to be voting on the Pentagon budget very soon. So there's going to be a lot going on in Congress that if that's your lane, we'll have plenty of information on that coming up too. So look out for Code Pink Congress September 3rd and Missing Piece Monday on September 9th. Please check out our DNC report back if you missed anything. And yeah, this has been an incredible Gaza Summer School. Like I said, we have a lot of work to do ahead of us. If you're not in a Code Pink chapter, please join one. We have a fully dedicated staff to not only connect you with chapters, but to start your own chapters. There's been a lot of chapter starting going on. So we are fully here to have your back and support you and what you all want to do. Shout out to our Missouri folks. They just launched a chapter this evening, like an hour before this call, and there were a lot of people on it. It warmed my heart seeing so many Midwesterners take action for Palestine. But thank you all so much. Thank you to Rania for joining us tonight, and thank you to all our previous guests that we had. And look out for a follow-up email from the Code Pink team. But thank you all so much. Please take the exit survey. and have a great rest of your night. Thank you so much.